Hello. Today I thought I would walk you guys through a little experimental process of a drawing format that I've been trying to come up with. It's kind of like been my quest for the last few months. I've tried all kinds of different drawing formats, and the two things I struggle with is doing all those guidelines and then establishing where I want everything and then erasing it. Seems like a lot of steps for me. I get, confused about where things are actually supposed to go, even though the guidelines are supposed to help with that. But for me, it just kind of confuses me more. And then I try different ones and I try to hybrid them and I try to figure out what works best with the least amount of effort and guidelines. So I got these two little charcoal pencils. I'm trying to use them up because I don't believe in waste and they're really tiny, but I'm going to be using this little hand sharpener to do that. My old trusty brass sharpener by M&R. You can buy replacement blades for these, and this thing never lets me down. I'm gonna keep things simple today. Got the two charcoal pencils. We have dark Durwent dark charcoal and a really cheap Royal and Langnickel. I think this might be hard or medium charcoal pencil. The reason why I like the cheap ones to at least start with is because they have a lot of binder in them and they're not all powdery and they're real easy to sharpen, and these things don't have any glare like graphite, so they will make it easier for you guys to see, easier for me to see, and blending is always nice with charcoal. Even though it's messy, it's like one of its most finest attributes is the fact that it shades nicely. So we'll start off with, although for this technique you shouldn't have to erase anything. This can lighten things up. A kneaded eraser can lighten things up, but it's not really for erasing mistakes and things. The erasers that I like to use later on for creating highlights and lightening certain shading areas, and strictly for shading, are my stick erasers. So these are like mechanical stick erasers. This is by Tombow, I think. Oh God, gamer, please be quiet. I told you I was filming. This is a mono eraser. This is real tiny, precision. I think it's 2 millimeter tip. Those are great for erasing out highlights and getting different tones in your shading. Okay, anyway, so those are the materials. Two charcoal pencils, an hand sharpener, a kneaded eraser, and maybe some stick erasers later when you're doing some highlights. All right, so what I have come up with, and I've tested it a few different times, even with a ballpoint pen. That way I'll know if it's a really usable format, because with ballpoint pen you're not erasing anything and you want to incorporate all those lines. So I'm going to start off by just making sure that this pencil is sharp, and this is going to be really straightforward, and I'm going to discuss measurements while I'm doing this so that you guys understand the whole reasoning behind that, so that you can incorporate that into maybe, your own formats. That's the whole goal, really, is just so you guys can get your own format going. And what I start out doing, we're not doing circles, we're not doing crisscrosses or lines in that regard. We are just going to make two parallel lines. Just two parallel lines. And the distance between these two, the length of these lines, you can make them super long, shorter, whatever. This will be your starting measurement. So this won't really matter. It'll only matter after this. So I know I made those like super wide, but it's just for illustration purposes. So the top of these lines, the very top, is going to be where the eyebrows are. The very bottom is going to be where your nose lands. So with eyebrows, I make them super, just one line, angle. And normally when I draw, I get my paper like really, really close to my face, but can't really do that for this video. So I'm going to put a little arch in the brow. And because this is charcoal, it will erase, so you know, you don't have to worry about things when you're first getting things laid down. I'm going to create the bottom of the nose. Just about where these lines would make a line across, that's where you're going to put your nose. And I like to make mine just slightly under it because the nose curves, you know, at the tip, at the bottom of the nose, it makes like a little U shape. So I'm going to make it under. If you do it even with, if you make the curve even with these two, and it'll be too high. And if you do make your nose like a little bit longer than you'd like it, you could always shorten it by erasing this part and just putting another curve here. So next we're going to do the nose bridge, or where the eyebrows and the nose bridge connect. This is just going to give you a little idea of where your eye sockets are going, because we're not actually drawing eye sockets. That's being formed by the eyebrow and the inner curve of the nose. So here's where your first measurement takes place, and you can even test this out on your own face. If you touch your eyebrow and the corner of your nose, that is the exact length between the corner of the nose and the bottom of the chin. It's right about there. So I'm going to make a slightly rounded, you know, you can make a straight line, doesn't really matter. All this is just placement. And I try to make it even as possible so it's in line, because we're not drawing crisscross lines. I would get those crooked anyway. And every time I would do crisscross lines, it would just make the whole face would just be unaligned, you know, so the lines never really helped me. When I look at things that are straight, like this pencil, they look curved or wavy to me. So looking at straight lines for guidelines has never helped me. Next, we are going to work on connecting this area here, which is the jawline. But I'm not going to make a completely straight line doing that. I mean, you could, if that's your style, if you want your face to look like that. But what I'm going to do is kind of aim toward it, but not actually touch the chin. Broken lines are a lot more, I guess you could say, interesting for the brain, because the brain will eventually connect broken lines. And from here, you would just make another line like this, because if you look at someone's jaw, it kind of has this little bend right here. And it's subtle. You can make it as extreme or not as you want. You'll notice these two are not extremely aligned, but you can go in and correct that. Look at that one, you want it to be like this one, or decide which one you want it to, which side you want it to be like, and just make your corrections. And like I said, I'm well aware these lines are like way thick and way obvious, but this is just placement, you know. Next, if you measure between the nose and the chin, right in the middle, you will have the mouth. So I'm just going to make a little line right here. If it's too low for your nose, you can adjust it later. I'm going to put the corners of the mouth in. Now we're going to work on corners. So corners of the mouth, corners of the eyes, usually align with right where this nose bridge goes inward. I doubt this is going to come out being like a really good portrait. This is just to, you know, just to show you guys. Okay, I'm going to make my upper eyelid, or eye rim, as you want to refer to it as, because the eyelid is up here, but this is just the rim of the eye where you would have your eyelashes coming out of. So we're just going to make a little line, be somewhat arched. Oops, I went down a little too far in that spot. And yeah, typically we're trying not to erase while we do this, just to, what I'm demonstrating with that is just basically that, you know, any lines that you make or any marks that you make are going to be incorporated into your end result. So I'm not trying to have too much guideline mess going on for me to have to erase, or I'd like to incorporate every mark that I make. Okay, underneath the lip, there's usually a shadow or a curve, not only at the bottom of the lip, but then you have this little area. This doesn't happen on everybody. A lot of people have, it's very flat right there, but you know, it's just a stylistic choice. It shows depth in 2 dimensions, so that's why I like to put it there. The top of the lip will be the little Cupid's bow. Usually will align perfectly with underneath the nose. And voila, you don't need a midline or a straight line to line this up with, because all these things are supposed to be underneath each other in line anyway. And I would often have to just constantly readjust stuff anyway, and when I had a line drawn down the middle, I would, you know, trying to erase that later, and unless I'm painting over it, that would always really annoy me, trying to get rid of that, because I have to draw my guidelines so dark. And if you're like me and you can't really see very well, and drawing your guidelines dark, they're very hard to erase. So from here, you will notice that the nose and the bend of the top part of the jaw is where you will have your ears. So I just like to draw like the bottom of my earlobes, because usually hair will be covering this. If it's not, you can go all the way up. I'll just demonstrate that by going all the way up. And the top of the ear usually aligns with the side of the eye. Just think about when you're wearing glasses, you know, the arms of the glasses are lined up with the eye right there on top of your ear. So I'm just going to make the earlobe on this side, because I'll probably make the hair coming down here, maybe behind the ear over here. It's just, you know, those are the things I randomly decide when I'm building a portrait. All right, so necks are not just these 2 lines coming down from, you know, unless it's a stylistic choice, you're following the side of the head. Your head goes in right here a little bit, and then it meets up with your neck. So this is all really one line. And it curves in. Maybe on some people more than others. I usually adjust that a little bit as I go. And there's usually a lot of shadow in the neck area, so I don't mind it being a little bit dark under here. Oh, I forgot to let you guys know that I'm going to be using my, where is it? It's probably still out here on my desk. It's a little brush, a little blending brush. Here it is. This was an old makeup brush. It's just like really small and rounded. I think it's for like blending eyeliner or eyeshadow underneath the lower lid or something. But I find it really, really useful for doing smaller shading. So I'm gonna keep that aside here with my eraser. And now is where we are gonna continue with our corners, which I said we were doing when we were doing the lips, but got sidetracked with the sides of the head here and the ears. So just quick recap, 2 lines, eyebrows, nose. That establishes the length and distances between things. And you'll notice the eyebrow and the nose, the same distance between the nose and the chin, roughly. I mean, let me see. 1, 2. Yep. Yeah, take your forefinger, touch your eyebrow, take your thumb, touch the bottom of your nose, and then hold it in this position, and then touch the side of your nose, and your thumb will line up with the bottom of your chin. Of course, everybody's faces are different, but your own body, your fingers, your length of your hand will typically fit in between the wrist and your elbow crease. This is Fibonacci sequence. You know, your fingers, every little length of your body fits within another length. And that's why that works. And that's how I knew when I was doing this that this was going to work when I was measuring my own face this way. So we're gonna make some little corners here. Making sure I'm in frame. Hope you guys can see this. I can't keep my camera directly above my head because I'll hit it. So I have it at an angle, looking at my paper like this. When I'm finished with this part, as I get more to the outer things and the shading, I'll bring the camera in at a little better angle. So the sides of the nose and the nostrils. So the nostrils, after you've drawn your little curve here, you've got a spot underneath the nose in the very center that dips down. On the sides of that, you have your nostrils. You can redefine these later. I mean, you don't want to do too much with the nose. That's one of the mistakes I used to make a lot. Was just like overworking and over detailing the nose. The nose is actually, even though it's the central focus of the face, it's kind of less is more when drawing it. So I'm making the sides, just kind of sweeping them up in like little long parenthesis motions. And I'm going to draw an indication, just a quick little shadow of one side of the bridge of the nose. Also with shading, if you do everything way too symmetrical, you're gonna flatten out everything and you won't have a real light source. So I'm going to, and my eyebrows on my people are typically kind of like too high on one side than the other, you know, but anyway, yeah. So the iris is a little bit larger than you might expect. You will have more iris showing than you will have white on either side. It's almost like there's thirds happening, 1, 2, 3, but the central third, which is the iris, is a little bit bigger, at least when you're looking at it straight on, than the white of the eye. And that'll help keep your iris straight. So kind of look at relations. So as much white is showing at the corner of that eye is pretty much how much white you want to be showing at the corner of this eye. And I kind of have to do things quickly and like adjust as I go, because as I said, the distortion in my vision is so rampant and crazy that I can't even tell when things are straight that they're straight, so, which means they're most likely never straight. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna take my eraser and I'm going to widen this part a little bit because I kind of shaded too much or added too much black in there. But eyes. I might sharpen this again before I do the pupil, but we're going to do just a small indication of the eyelid. And we're going to shade the mouth a little bit. This is where you can bring the corners of the mouth up slightly. Readjust the width if you have it too narrow or too wide. I've got a slight part going on, so making it darker in the middle. And the next two things I do are going to be highlight lines. So before I've actually shaded, I'm going to draw a little line, a light line across the bottom of the lip, because it indicates where the light bends around that rounded form. Do the same thing with the nose. It's almost like a straight line kind of goes across here, and you've got some shading underneath the nose, and this is where the nose protrudes forward just like the lip, and that will give you some little indicators later for where to put your highlights. All right, hair. I've struggled with hair for a while because I get caught up in doing the little individual hair strands. But before we do the entire form, there's another little trick of measurement. What I did up until recently is do a very rounded and way too high top of the head, and then it would always result in the hair looking like it was like placed on top like a wig or something. But as far as your hairline goes, which is what you want to start with if you're not doing bangs. If you are doing bangs, you can always draw the bangs over the hairline anyway. So the same measurement. The eyebrow to the nose is going to be the exact same distance to the hairline. And we've now reached the top of the page, so that's exactly where the hairline is going to be. Hairline is right here. And the hair grows upward and outward. And regardless of if you're gonna bring hair down or do bangs, when I'm first mapping out a face, I like to just put the hairline in, just because it gives more of a completed look. Even if you end up covering it up later, you kind of know where you're at. Another thing I used to forget to do is bring hair down in front of the ears. Now, unless you have your hair shaved right here, or you have a really, you know, like like my hairline is really deep, so it doesn't come down as far around the ear as, like, you know, people who have more prominent hairlines or more thicker hair. But nonetheless, there's always a little bit of hair that kind of grows around the temple and down in front of the ear. So, like I said, whether or not you're going to be putting bangs on this person or putting lots of hair around, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to put a hairline in, just because it's good to know, right? Another measurement thing, the distance between, let me see if I can remember this correctly. Yeah, between your corner of your eye and your corner of your mouth nose, corner of eye, corner of nose is a smaller distance. It's also the same distance between the corner of the nose and the corner of the mouth. You see that we just measured this and it's exact. It's also the same distance between the corner of the mouth and the bottom of the chin, exact distance. So you know your distances are working out because you can keep measuring throughout the entire process and it will always line up. Now this same measurement between the corner of the eye and the corner of the nose is also the same amount of distance you are going to have to add on for the top of the head from your hairline. Because the top of your head and your hairline are not the same. Sometimes if you make your hairline equal with the top of the head, it can look really weird. You're either gonna make your person look like their head look too short or the head look too high. So these two things are different. Mine's gone off my paper. This measurement here has gone off my paper, but I'm gonna curve my fingers around and I'm gonna stop right there, and that's going to tell me that this is on its way to the top of the head, even though it's off the paper. And it will give a more, oh, dare I say, realistic or proper measurement for what hair will look like on a believable head. Now this is where I get kind of just not precise, you know. When I'm drawing hair, I just kind of start doing wavy marks and I see where it takes me. Hair can be very expressive that way. You don't have to be super precise as long as your bases are established. So again, at the risk of drawing every single hair individually, I'm going to just make this shape of the outside of the hair and do a little bit of shadow next to where it meets the shoulders. Yeah, like I said, this isn't gonna be like a masterpiece or anything. It's just going to be a map, because you can spend a lot of time on this after you've established everything, and you can make it look how you want, but just to get things started, sometimes it's just really frustrating to not know from the get-go how to, you know, map things out, and then you end up with something you really like and you're like, how did I do that? Or you just can't get stuff off the ground and you're just wondering why. Like, how come I can't make this work? Even with those guidelines that are taught for Loomis method or Riley or anything else. I'm not saying this is the end-all be-all to portrait mapping, but it's just what I've come up with to make things easier for myself to get those measurements correct and possibly make it repeatable and not struggle too much. Alright, so I'm going to go in with my little shader after I do what I promised and put some pupils in to this girl's eyes. Ooh, that was sharp. Just stabbed myself. Okay, I'm going to pick this up so I can get close. For pupils, I've just been drawing little circles lately and leaving the center not colored in so it can be a highlight. There's one. 2. Okay. this is where we start to shade and erase, which is basically just a form of shading. Because when you erase, you're just putting in highlights. At least that's what I have learned over time, is that erasing is not as much for getting rid of mistakes as it is for just another part of the drawing. So in my hand, so I don't have to keep reaching for things, I'm going to keep my highlight shader eraser, my pencil that I've been using, and my blending brush. And later I might come in with this darker black. There it is, my teeny little pencil. All right. So I'm going to use whatever it is I get on my brush from doing the hair shading. And I'm going to shade the cheeks. Let's do some contours. Softening the edges. And after we shade this part, or do the shading on for the contours and stuff, we'll just go in with the eraser. And that'll pretty much be it. You know, I don't want to get like too into this. I don't know, dare I call it a tutorial? It's just something that I'm sharing with you guys because I know that a lot of people who watch these videos are also trying to learn. I mean, I used to watch a lot of people and just like zoom into their process, and even if it was just a quiet video where they weren't talking, they were just playing music or something, I would just like study what it is they were doing. Sometimes I would take screenshots and then just try to like copy during my own practicing, you know, not anything I've ever posted, but like do my own version of how I thought they got where they did without explaining anything to me. And like I said, I've tried the Loomis and Riley methods and different versions of formats for drawing faces. And right now, this seems to be what I would consider a repeatable and reliable little process. So I hope it helps you guys if you're looking for that type of information. I'm gonna erase out the sides here where I originally put the ears, just a little bit. And remember, it's always lined up with the nose. I'm going to shorten the length of her chin a little bit by just adding it into the shadow. It's just another trick. You can do that by just drawing a line and leaving this kind of still light so that it leaves some reflected light. But yeah, there's just little tricks that when you're making changes or adjustments, you can just incorporate some of that, those marks that are already there, you know, into some shadows. Or yeah, I like to darken the whites of the eyes a little bit because since they're not a highlight, you don't want them to be as light as those highlights. I'm going to dab the whole eye for a minute just to kind of, you know, you can always erase out that highlight easier because there's already a line drawn there. There's always a shadow around the hairline. Now I'm gonna come in here with my eraser and put a little highlight on the top of the eyelid. And to put a little highlight on the nose. Put some on the lip where we already drew that line. Put one on the top of the lip where the Cupid's bow is. A little bit on the chin. And I always try to put one on the side as reflective light on the side of the face. I don't know, I just like the way it looks. Kind of brings some dimension. Under the brow bone. And then in the corners of the eyes, where the divot is between the nose and, or the nose bridge and the corner of the eye. So now I'm going to use my smaller mono eraser. I'm gonna do the highlight inside the eye. I can line it up with it. It's like a moving bullseye, you know, my eyesight. It's like a moving target. I don't even know if I'm like on the right spot sometimes. I'm going, wait a minute. Okay. Now I'm going to sharpen the black, the very black charcoal. This one's a little trickier to sharpen because it's so soft, but this sharpener is really, really good, even for pastel pencils. All right. So I'm going to darken. Let's see if I can change my light. Sorry, I think my thing is going out and it keeps blinking every time I move the light. Let's make sure I'm in frame. This is a very, very black, very, very soft charcoal. And this paper doesn't have a lot of tooth, so it's gonna get powdery. But I'm just using this to demonstrate some shading. You can use a black acrylic marker, you can use I would say a black ballpoint pen, but sometimes the charcoal gets all caught up in the ball of the pen and makes it skip or just messes up the pen. So I'm initially just going in and darkening areas after I've done highlight, and I really just wanted to share with you guys the whole thing about the measurements and the placement. And this is, you know, it's drawing from imagination. If you're doing portrait references from photos for portraits, a lot of what I discussed about measurements, you'll see that anyway in real life. I'm just applying it to doing imaginary portrait. You can highly stylize things to where the eyes are huge and the mouth is really tiny, like in anime. And the proportions will still need to measure a certain way. For anime, I don't know exactly what that is, because I think there's some artists that kind of have their own idea of what proportions look right to them for that. And usually they're highly exaggerated. But, yeah, for my style of drawing, it can lean more stylized, and I just kind of borrow from realism with the shading and the highlights and stuff, because I like bringing depth into the drawing, but a lot of the rules still apply. So I'm just going to darken up these pupils a little bit, go around that highlight, and I think we will call it a wrap. Yeah, so I hope you guys found this helpful. I've been using this method with ballpoint pen drawing, and it's a little bit easier to rely on the method without hoping for something to turn out. You know that feeling when you're doing something, you're like, oh, I hope I'm going in the right direction, and it turns out okay, and then you can't repeat it. That's often the most frustrating thing about art or drawing, is if you want to repeat something without hoping for the best, then you kind of have to have a format. Whether or not you make it up yourself or you borrow from one that works for you, all of that is, it just makes the experience a whole lot more enjoyable when you don't have to guess too much. So anyway, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.